She sat in her wheelchair at the edge of a desert gas station, watching her son's grey pickup vanish into the heat haze. 1 hour, 2. His phone switched off. 78 years old, abandoned like an old chair at the curb, and Edith Caldwell finally understood. Her own blood had thrown her away. Then she heard it, thunder rolling up from the highway, growing until the windows shook. Around the bend they came, 90 Hell's Angels, the men mothers pulled their children away from. They filled the lot like a dark tide, and the one with President stitched over his heart pulled off his glasses, looked straight at her, and started walking. The desert wind in Kingman carried grit fine as flour, and it settled into the wheels of Edith Caldwell's chair while she waited for a son who was already 40 miles gone. She did not know that yet. She sat outside the Desert Star Fuel and Mart with her hands folded in her lap, a faded blue cardigan buttoned to her throat against a heat that had nothing to do with cold. The afternoon sun pressed flat against the cracked asphalt, and the air shimmered above the pumps like something about to confess. Edith was 78 years old. Her hair, thin and white, lifted at the edges in the wind, and she kept smoothing it down out of an old habit, the way she'd done before church on Sundays for 50 years, back when Sundays still meant something, and Walter was still alive to button the back of her dress. Brandon had told her to wait. "Just 5 minutes, Ma. I gotta gas up and grab smokes." He'd said it without looking at her, the way he said most things now, his eyes fixed on his phone, his foot already tapping toward the door. She had nodded. She always nodded. A mother learns the shape of her own swallowed words. That had been an hour ago. The truck, Brandon's grey pickup with the dented tailgate and the bumper sticker she'd never understood, was no longer in the lot. She had heard it leave. She'd assumed he was pulling around to the air pump or the far side where the diesel was cheaper. She'd assumed a great many things over 78 years, and most of them had been kindnesses she'd invented for people who hadn't earned them. A young woman came out of the mart, wiping her hands on a green apron. Her name tag read Nora. She was maybe 23, with tired eyes and a kindness in her posture that hadn't yet been beaten out of her by the job. "Ma'am, you been out here a while. You okay?" "Oh," Edith said, and her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. "I'm waiting for my son. He's getting gas." Nora glanced around the empty lot. The pumps stood like patient sentinels. There was no grey truck. There was no sun. "What's his vehicle, hun?" "A pickup, grey." Edith's fingers found the hem of her cardigan and worried it. "He told me 5 minutes." Nora's mouth pressed into a line. She'd seen this before, not often, but enough. The bus station drop-offs, the nursing home runaways. The quiet arithmetic of an adult child, deciding a parent had become a sum too heavy to carry. She crouched down, so she was level with the old woman's eyes. "Do you have his number? We can call him." Edith recited it from memory, the digits of a boy she'd taught to tie his shoes, and Nora dialed. It rang 4 times and went to a voicemail that was full. She tried again, same. A 3rd time, and this time it didn't ring at all. Sent straight to silence, the unmistakable sound of a phone deliberately switched off. Nora lowered the phone slowly. She didn't say what they both now understood. She didn't have to. "Maybe he had an emergency," Edith offered, and even she could hear how thin it sounded. "Brandon's a busy man. He has a business, landscaping. He does very well." "I'm sure he does," Nora said gently. The truth sat between them, ugly and plain. Edith had lived with Brandon and his wife Tasha for 3 years, ever since the stroke took the strength from her right side and Walter's pension stopped stretching far enough to matter. 3 years of being shifted between rooms, of overhearing conversations through walls. "She can't keep living here. The kids need the space. She's not our problem, Brandon. She's the state's problem now." 3 years of pretending she hadn't heard, because hearing meant accepting, and accepting meant she had raised a man who could leave his mother at a gas station off Route 66 like an old chair set out at the curb. "Is there someone else I can call?" Nora asked. "A daughter, a friend, a church?" Edith thought of the friends who had died, one by one, until the phone simply stopped ringing. She thought of the church she could no longer get to. She thought of Walter, gone 6 years now, and how he would have driven through the night to find her. "There's no one," she said. The words didn't break. She'd grown too old for breaking. They just lay there, true and complete. It was then that they heard it. A low, rolling thunder coming up from the south, where the highway bent out of the heat haze. Not one engine, not 5. A sound like the earth itself clearing its throat, growing and gathering until the windows of the mart began to tremble in their frames. Nora straightened up. Oh no. Around the bend they came, 2 and 3 abreast, a river of chrome and black leather pouring off the highway and into the wide lot. Harley after Harley, the throttle rumble bouncing off the mountains, vests stitched with a winged death's head that anyone who'd ever watched the news would recognize. Hell's Angels. Dozens of them. The kind of men that mothers pulled their children away from in parking lots, the kind that emptied a diner of polite conversation just by walking in. 90 of them, though no one was counting yet. They filled the lot like a dark tide. Kickstands dropping in a ragged chorus, engines ticking as they cooled. Big men, hard men, sunburned arms and greying beards and eyes hidden behind dark glasses. Nora instinctively stepped between them and the old woman, her green apron a flimsy shield against 100 years of fear and reputation. And Edith Caldwell, who had nothing left to lose, and no one left to lose it to, simply watched. She was too tired to be afraid. After what her own blood had done to her today, there was nothing these strangers could do that would be worse. One of them, older than most, with a grey beard and a presence the others seemed to bend around, swung off his bike near the pumps. He pulled off his glasses. His eyes went to Nora, then past her, to the small woman in the wheelchair with the wind in her thin white hair and the dignity of someone who has decided not to weep in front of strangers. He stood very still for a long moment. Then he started walking toward her. His name was Roy Hutchins, and for 30 years people had crossed the street to avoid him. He was 58, built like a man who'd done hard labor before his joints turned against him, his beard gone iron grey, and his forearms a museum of faded ink. Eagles, names, dates, a small cross near his wrist worn soft by time. The vest he wore had a single word stitched above the heart: President. The chapter behind him had ridden up from Phoenix that morning, 90 strong, headed to a memorial run for a brother they'd lost to cancer in the spring. They'd stopped for fuel. Nothing more. Roy had seen the old woman the second he pulled in. He'd seen the way the girl in the apron stood guard, the way the wheelchair sat alone at the edge of the lot like something forgotten. He'd spent his life reading situations fast. It was a survival skill where he came from, and this one read like a wound. He stopped a respectful distance from the chair and crouched, the leather creaking so he wasn't looming over her. "Ma'am." His voice was a low gravel, but it was careful, the way a big man learns to be careful around small things. "You all right out here?" Up close, Edith could see he had kind eyes, tired and lined and grey as the desert, but kind. It surprised her, and she was annoyed at herself for being surprised. She had spent her whole long life being told what kind of person looked like what, and here she was, at the end of it, learning she'd been a fool. "My son left me here," she said. There was no point dressing it up. "He told me 5 minutes, that was an hour ago. His phone is off." Behind Roy, the men had gone quiet. Bikers have a way of seeming not to listen while hearing everything, and 90 of them had heard that. A ripple moved through the lot, a tightening, a stillness. These were men who knew in their own bones what it was to be thrown away. Half of them had been thrown away themselves, by fathers, by the army, by a country that had decided they were the wrong kind of men. Abandonment had a particular smell to them, and they knew it the way wolves know weather. Roy was quiet for a moment. A muscle worked in his jaw. "What's your name, Mum?" "Edith. Edith Caldwell." "Edith." He said it like it mattered. "I'm Roy. You eaten today?" She hadn't. She'd had a cup of coffee at 6 that morning in Brandon's kitchen, standing in the doorway, because no one had offered her a chair. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until he asked, and the simple decency of the question, the fact that this terrifying-looking stranger had thought to ask it when her own son had not, undid something in her. Her eyes filled. She blinked hard and looked away toward the mountains, furious at her own weakness. Roy pretended not to notice. He had the decency of a man who'd been wept in front of before, who knew that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is study the horizon while a person gathers themselves back up. "Dale," he called over his shoulder, not loud. A younger man peeled off from the crowd. Late 20s, lean, a soft patch on his vest that marked him as a prospect, not yet a full member. He had a baby face under his beard and a way of moving that said he was eager to prove himself. "Go in, get her a hot meal," Roy said. "Whatever they got that's real. Sandwich, soup, something, and water, cold." He looked back at Edith. "You take coffee?" "With cream," she admitted, "if it's no trouble." "It's no trouble." He nodded at Dale, who hustled toward the mart, and Nora, sensing the temperature of the situation had changed, went with him to help. Roy settled himself onto an upturned milk crate near her chair, which put him low, beneath her eyeline. A small choreography of respect that Edith noticed and would remember for the rest of her life. For a while, neither of them spoke. The engines ticked. Somewhere a meadowlark called from the scrub. "You don't have to talk to me," he said finally. "But I'm going to sit here till we figure out what's what. That all right with you?" "It's all right," she said. And then, because the silence had a gravity to it, and she was so very tired of carrying the thing alone. "He didn't used to be like this. Brandon. He was a sweet boy. He used to bring me dandelions, whole fistfuls, the weeds, you know, and he'd act like they were roses." She smoothed her cardigan. "I don't know where it went. The sweetness. I keep thinking, if I'd done something different. No." Roy said it flat and certain, the first hard edge in his voice. "Don't do that. They've been around a long time, Edith. A man who'd leave his own mother in a parking lot, that's not on the mother. That's on the man. I promise you that." She looked at him then, really looked, at the death's head on his back, and the cross on his wrist, and the grey eyes that had seen God knew what, and she said, "People would be afraid of you, if they saw you on the street. They are." He almost smiled. "Every day. Why?" He considered it, turning a cheap silver ring on his finger. "Because it's easy to be afraid of a thing instead of looking at it. The vest, the bikes, the reputation." He shrugged. "Some of it we earned. I won't lie to you. We're not choir boys, but a man gets judged by his worst day, mostly, and we got a lot of worst days stitched on our backs. Nobody asks about the rest." "What's the rest?" Roy was quiet a moment. "We got a charity run every December, toys for the kids' hospital in Phoenix. We got brothers who pull veterans out of the bottle. We buried 4 of our own this year and dug every grave ourselves." He looked at her. "But that don't make the news. A man in a leather vest is only ever the one thing to most folks." Dale came back then, carefully balancing a paper tray, a turkey sandwich, a cup of soup steaming despite the heat, a bottle of water beaded with cold, and a coffee light, exactly as she'd asked. He set it on her lap with a tenderness that looked almost comical on a man his size, and he crouched there a second to make sure she had a grip on it before he let go. There's pie too, if you want it after, Dale said shyly. Apple. I got it just in case. Edith looked at the food. She looked at the 90 men standing in the heat of an Arizona afternoon, none of them moving to leave, none of them looking at their phones, all of them somehow arranged so that she was at the center of a thing that felt, impossibly, like being guarded. She had not been at the center of anyone's care in a very long time. "Thank you," she whispered, and this time she didn't fight the tears. She let them come. And not one of those 90 hard men looked away to spare himself the sight of an old woman crying. They stood with her in it, the way you stand with family. Roy reached out and very gently put his rough hand over her thin one. "Eat," he said. "We're not going anywhere." The sandwich was half gone when Roy asked the question that would change the shape of the afternoon. "Edith, this son of yours, you got an address for him?" She did. She gave it to him, a house in a development outside Bullhead City, 40 miles south, with a name she'd never liked. Coyote Ridge Estates. As she said it, Dale, who'd been quietly thumbing his phone, looked up sharp. "Roy, there's a thing on the local Facebook, the Kingman Lost and Found page." His young face had gone strange. "Somebody posted 20 minutes ago, picture of the lot, picture of her." He turned the screen around so Roy could see it. Caption says, it says, "Anybody know who this is? Old lady abandoned at the Desert Star. Somebody call the county." Roy took the phone. His jaw tightened as he read. He scrolled. The post had been shared, and shared again. And in the comments, somebody, a local who recognized the cardigan or the chair or just the situation, had tagged a name. "Isn't this Brandon Caldwell's mother, the landscaping guy?" And below it, in the casual cruelty of the internet, a reply, "Lol, he's been telling everyone she went into a home in Vegas. Guess this is the home." Roy went very still, the kind of still that the men around him knew to read. Dale took a half-step back. It would have been easy, in that moment, to become the thing the world already believed them to be. To climb on 90 motorcycles and ride down to Coyote Ridge Estates and make Brandon Caldwell understand, in the oldest language men have, exactly what he had done. Roy felt the old heat rise in him, the one he'd spent 20 years learning to govern. He could feel 90 men behind him, feeling the same heat, waiting for a word. He handed the phone back to Dale. "No," he said quietly, "that's not what she needs." "Roy, look at her, Dale." Roy didn't raise his voice. "She doesn't need us to go break her son. That'd just teach her she comes from violence. She's got enough shame today without us adding ours to it." He rubbed his face. "What she needs is to not be alone. The rest we do clean." This was the moment Edith would tell people about years later, when she tried to explain what had happened to her on that ordinary, terrible day. Not the food, not the rescue. This, the moment the frightening man chose restraint, when no one would have blamed him for choosing anything else. But Roy Hutchins had not always been a man who chose restraint, and that was the part of him the afternoon was reaching toward. He'd had a mother once. Her name was Carol, and she'd raised him alone in a trailer outside Barstow on a waitress's wages and a backbone of pure salt. When Roy went bad, and he'd gone bad young, 16 and angry and looking for a family the streets were happy to provide, she never stopped showing up. Visited him in county, wrote him in prison every week in handwriting that got shakier as the years went. And when she got old, and the cancer came, Roy had been 3 states away on a run he couldn't get out of, chasing a brotherhood that had needed him more than his dying mother did, or so he'd told himself. She died in a county facility. Alone. He'd gotten the call at a truck stop in New Mexico and had pulled his bike over and sat in the dirt for 2 hours, unable to move, a 400-pound man brought down to nothing by a thing he could never take back. That was 11 years ago. He had not forgiven himself. He never would. So when he looked at Edith Caldwell sitting in the wind with her son's voicemail full and her dignity held together by safety pins and stubbornness, he was not only looking at her. He was looking at Carol Hutchins, dying alone while her boy chased ghosts. He was looking at the one debt a man can never pay because the creditor is in the ground. He couldn't fix it, but maybe he could do for a stranger what he'd failed to do for his own blood. Edith. He crouched again at her side. I'm gonna ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Where do you want to go? Not where you're supposed to go, where you want. She blinked. No one had asked her where she wanted to go in years. Her life had become a series of places she was sent. I don't have anywhere, she said. Everything I own is in that house. My medications, my pictures of Walter, the quilt my mother made me. Her voice caught. It's all there, and I can't go back there, not after. I can't ask him to take me back, even if he would. I'd rather die in this chair than beg that boy. You won't beg anybody, Roy said. Not while I'm breathing. Here's what we're gonna do, and you tell me if any of it's wrong. He held up a thick finger. First, we get your things. Not by force. Legal, clean, witnessed. That stuff's yours. He doesn't get to keep your husband's pictures. A second finger. Then we find you somewhere real. Not a parking lot, not a county home where they forget your name. A real place with people who know you're there. He paused. I got a sister-in-law runs a senior community in Phoenix. Good place. Plants in the windows. They do bingo, God help us. Folks live, they don't just wait around to die. I can't afford. Didn't ask you what you could afford. His tone allowed no argument. 90 of us. We pass a helmet around. You'd be surprised what falls into it. We do it for kids at Christmas. We can do it for you. Edith stared at him. You don't even know me. Roy looked at her for a long moment, and something old and broken moved behind his grey eyes. I knew somebody like you, he said, and I didn't show up for her, so I'm showing up for you. Don't take that from me, Edith. I need it more than you do. She didn't understand all of what he meant, but she understood enough. She reached out her good hand, the one the stroke had spared, and laid it on his weathered cheek, the way a mother does. And Roy Hutchins, president, ex-convict, the man people crossed the street to avoid, closed his eyes and let himself be touched with tenderness for the first time in longer than he could say. Behind them, 90 engines waited in the dying light. And 40 miles south, in a house in Coyote Ridge Estates, Brandon Caldwell's phone, switched off, buried in a glove box, growing colder by the minute, had no idea what was coming up the highway to find him. They went at dusk, when the desert turns the color of a struck match, not all 90. Roy was a careful man, and a careful man knows the difference between strength and intimidation. He took 8, the senior members, the ones who could be trusted to keep their hands at their sides no matter what was said. The rest stayed at the Desert Star with Edith, where Nora had wheeled out the good chair from the break room, and the apple pie had been cut into 90 impossibly small pieces, and a hard-faced man named Curtis was showing the old woman pictures of his granddaughter on a cracked phone screen, while she pronounced the child the most beautiful she'd ever seen. Roy rode at the head of the small column down Route 68, the wind off the Black Mountains pulling at his beard. He'd made 2 calls before they left. One to a lawyer the club kept on retainer, a small, ferocious woman named Patricia Vance, who handled their charity paperwork and occasionally their messes. The other to the Mojave County Sheriff's non-emergency line, because Roy Hutchins had learned the hard way that the most dangerous thing a man like him could do was anything that looked like a threat. He wanted witnesses. He wanted the law standing right there beside him, so that no one could ever say the Hells Angels had come to a man's house in the dark to do harm. They arrived at Coyote Ridge Estates as the streetlights flickered on. A sheriff's cruiser was already idling at the entrance, and a deputy named Officer Reyes, young, wary, one hand never far from his belt, got out to meet them. Mr. Hutchins. He'd clearly expected something other than the calm, grey-bearded man who extended a hand. "Thanks for coming, officer. We don't want trouble. We want this lady's belongings, and we want it done right, with you watching every second so nobody can lie about it later." Roy nodded toward Patricia, who'd pulled up in a sensible sedan, briefcase already in hand. "That's our attorney. The property's hers. The woman's, I mean. We're not here to take a thing that isn't." Reyes studied him for a long moment, and whatever he'd been told to expect quietly rearranged itself behind his eyes. Brandon Caldwell answered the door in basketball shorts and a beer, and the color drained from his face in stages, first at the deputy, then at the lawyer, then slowly, horribly, at the 8 enormous men in death's head vests arranged across his manicured lawn like a verdict. What is this?" His voice cracked up an octave. "Officer, these men are trespassing. I want them—" "They're not trespassing, sir," Reyes said evenly. "They're on the public sidewalk, and I'm on your walk because I have reason to believe an at-risk adult was abandoned today. You want to talk about that?" Tasha appeared behind Brandon, phone already up and recording, her face a mask of performed outrage. "We are calling our lawyer. This is harassment. You can't just—" "Ma'am." Patricia Vance stepped forward, small and immovable as a fence post. "I am a lawyer, so let's all be lawyers together. Your mother-in-law, Edith Caldwell, was left at a commercial gas station in 101-degree heat at 2 o'clock this afternoon. There is a time-stamped photograph. There are witnesses. There is a very active Facebook post in which you appear to have told this entire community she was living comfortably in Las Vegas." Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. "Now, Mr. Caldwell, you can hand over Mrs. Caldwell's personal property, her medications, her documents, her photographs, the quilt, voluntarily and on camera tonight, with this officer as witness. Or we can do it the long way, which involves adult protective services, a welfare investigation, and a conversation about elder abandonment, which the state of Arizona takes a very particular interest in. Your choice. We've got all night." Brandon's mouth opened and closed. The beer can crumpled slightly in his grip. She's a lot of work," he finally managed, and it was the wrong thing. So wrong that even Tasha stopped recording. "You don't understand. She needs help with everything. We have kids. We couldn't—" And here Roy Hutchins stepped forward, just one step, and spoke for the first time. His voice was very quiet, which made it worse. "She wiped you," he said, "when you were a baby. You were a lot of work too." He let that sit. "She told me you used to bring her dandelions, whole fistfuls, said you acted like they were roses." His grey eyes didn't blink. "I had a mother once, son. I let her die alone because I told myself she was a lot of work too, that I had somewhere more important to be. I'm going to carry that till they put me in the ground. I came 40 miles tonight to make sure you don't get to carry it too easy, because believe me, and I am the only man on this lawn who can promise you this, it does not get lighter." The lawn went silent. Even the deputy looked at the dirt. Something in Brandon's face came apart. Maybe it was the beer, or the lawyer, or the 8 enormous men, or the deputy's pen poised over his pad, or maybe, and Roy would choose to believe this later, because believing it cost him nothing, and it might even have been true. Maybe it was the dandelions. Maybe some sweet buried boy heard the word and remembered who he'd been before he became this. Brandon set down the beer. "I'll get her stuff," he said hoarsely. It's in the garage." I packed it up. I don't know what I was gonna do with it. It took 40 minutes, box by box, under the deputy's eye, Patricia checking each one against a list Edith had recited over the phone. The medications, the folder of documents, a shoebox of photographs, Walter young and laughing, Walter old and grey, their wedding, a boy holding up a fistful of weeds and grinning with 3 teeth missing, and the quilt, hand-stitched, smelling of cedar and 100 years of women. Roy carried the quilt to his bike himself and strapped it down like it was made of glass. As they prepared to leave, Brandon came down the driveway, hesitant, hollow-eyed. Is she okay? Can I see her? Roy looked at him a long moment. She's safe, she's fed, she's with people who will know her name tomorrow. He swung a leg over his bike. Whether she wants to see you, that's hers to decide, not yours and not mine. You want to earn it back, you got the rest of your life to try. But son, he kicked the engine over and it roared up between them like a thing alive. You start by understanding she didn't owe you the chance. Nobody owes you the chance to undo this. If she gives it, it's a gift. You treat it like one. And then 8 motorcycles turned in the streetlight and rode back north toward the woman waiting in the desert, the quilt riding home where it belonged. The Sunrise Gardens, senior community in North Phoenix, had geraniums in the window boxes and a parrot named Gus in the lobby who said, "Well, hello there," to everyone who passed, whether they liked it or not. Edith Caldwell moved into a sunny 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor 3 weeks after the day at the Desert Star. The helmet that had gone around the lot that afternoon had come back heavy, heavier than anyone expected, because when 90 men who've been judged their whole lives get the chance to be the thing nobody believes they are, they empty their pockets. It covered the deposit and then some. Roy's sister-in-law, a brisk and warm woman named Florence who ran the place, had wept openly when Roy explained the situation and had personally chosen the room with the best morning light. Walter's pictures went up on the walls, the quilt went on the bed, and on the day she moved in, Edith looked out her new window and saw, in the parking lot below, a sea of chrome and leather, not 90 but a good 24, come to help an old woman carry boxes up a flight of stairs. They did not stop coming. This was the part no one could have predicted, the part that broke every expectation the world had handed Edith Caldwell over 78 years. The men kept showing up. Curtis came on Thursdays, and they did the crossword, his enormous tattooed finger tracing the clues while she supplied the words. Dale, sweet, eager Dale, who'd brought the apple pie just in case, came to learn how to cook, of all things, because his own grandmother had died before she could teach him, and Edith taught him to make a pot roast that he photographed and sent to her with a string of exclamation points that made her laugh out loud in the empty room. The chapter put her on the list for the December toy run, and that winter she sat bundled in her quilt at the kids' hospital in Phoenix and handed out presents from her lap while 100 bikers played Santa. And she understood at last what Roy had meant about the part that never makes the news, and Roy came every Sunday. He'd ride up after the morning's business, park the Harley below her window, and climb the stairs with his bad knees complaining the whole way, and they'd sit on her little balcony in the dry Phoenix sun and not say much at all. Sometimes he brought his old photographs, Carol Hutchins squinting into a Barstow sun 50 years gone, young and tired and beautiful. Edith would hold them and listen to him talk about the mother he'd failed, and she'd say the things a mother says, the things Carol would have said, and Roy would look out at the mountains and let an old wound do the slow, impossible work of beginning to close. "You know," Edith told him one Sunday, the geraniums nodding in the breeze, "people would never believe it if I told them that I was saved by the Hells Angels." She smiled, mischievous, a flash of the girl she'd once been. "My friends from church would clutch their pearls right off their necks." "Let 'em clutch," Roy said. He was quiet a moment. "Most folks need the bad guy to stay the bad guy. Makes the world simpler, easier to know who to be scared of. They're wrong, though, about you. Some of it they're right about, Edith. I told you. We're not angels. whatever the patch says. He turned the silver ring on his finger. But a person's more than the worst thing about him. And he's more than the scariest thing about him, too. That's the part folks forget. They see the vest, they stop looking. They never find out there's a man in there who'd carry your quilt 40 miles because he couldn't carry his own mother's. Edith reached over and took his rough hand in her thin one, the way she had that first day in the wind. There were hard days, too, days she didn't pretend away. There were nights when the stroke-numb side of her body ached, and she lay awake remembering the sound of the truck pulling away, the particular cruelty of being made to wait by someone who already knew he wasn't coming back. There were mornings she caught herself making coffee for 2 out of 50 years of habit, then standing in the small kitchen with the second cup not knowing whom it was for. Grief for a living son, it turned out, was its own strange country, lonelier in some ways than grief for a dead husband, because there was no headstone to visit, only a silence shaped exactly like a boy who'd once brought her weeds and called them roses. But the men had taught her something about carrying weight she couldn't put down. "You don't carry it alone," Roy had said one Sunday, watching her go quiet. "You let somebody sit in it with you." So she let them. And the ache, while it never left, learned to share the room. "Brandon called," she said softly. "Last week." Roy went still. "Yeah?" "I let it go to voicemail." She watched a hawk turn lazy circles over the lot. "I'm not ready. Maybe I won't ever be. But he left a message. He said he was sorry, and he said he'd been thinking about dandelions." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "I don't know what I'll do with that yet. But I wanted you to know he tried, like you said. The gift's mine to give, if I ever decide to." Roy nodded slowly. "That's right, it is. And if I do give it," she said, "I'll do it the way you taught me, clean, with my dignity in my own 2 hands." They sat a while longer as the afternoon went gold. Below, a few of the men were washing their bikes in the lot, laughing at something, the sound carrying up on the warm air. Gus the parrot hollered, "Well, hello there," at a delivery driver. Somewhere a sprinkler ticked across the geraniums. Edith Caldwell had been thrown away by her own blood at a gas station in the desert, left like an old chair at the curb, sure that the world had taken its final measure of her and found her worthless. And the men the world had thrown away in turn. The frightening men, the marked men, the men everyone had already decided were the villains of the story, had ridden out of the heat haze and picked her up and carried her home. She had been wrong about them. The whole world was wrong about them. And there was a strange, late, beautiful grace in learning, at 78, that you could still be wrong about something so completely, and that being wrong could save your life. "Roy," she said. "Yeah, Edith. Thank you for showing up." He looked at her, this woman who was not his mother but who had given him, somehow, a piece of the absolution he'd stopped believing he could ever earn. "Thank you for letting me," he said. And the Sunday sun came down warm over the geraniums and the chrome, and the two of them, the old woman and the outlaw, family by choice, in a world that had taught them both, far too late and just in time, never to trust what a thing looks like from the road.